In this video, I'm going to show you how to take a photo like this, create a result like this by editing it from scratch with no presets and using all the panels of the Lightroom Develop module. But stick around because later in this video, I'm also going to show you how to do this. The first thing I'm going to do in this image is to crop it to the desired composition that I want, which is for the third line to cut between her two eyes. From there, I'm going to go down to the enable profile correction. This is to get rid of the vignetting and the distortion the lens caused, and you can see if I click and unclick it, there's quite a bit. And then from there I'm going to just go to transform and say auto, and this will pull the walls and the cavity on the right straight. I'm going to go up to color profiles and I'm going to choose the Adobe standard, that is to give me a bit of a flatter profile. I'm now going to up the exposure quite a bit and actually overdo it a bit so that I can see the white balance clearly, and I'm going to take the temperature and drop it quite a bit until I can see the magenta. Drop the magenta ever so slightly, and then let's do it a bit more, and then bring up the warmth. From there, I'm going to down the highlights, down the whites a bit, open up the shadows, and for that now I see I want to up the white balance slightly again. I'm going to go down to the tone curves now, and I'm going to specifically work with the RGB, and the reason for that is I want to create a bit of contrast but within the color ranges. And be careful when using this so that you don't overdo it, but I'm going to create a point there and just slightly pull this down and go to the green, do exactly the same, and then the blue and pull that down, and I quite like that. I'm going to pull the blue down even more, but go back to the red and pull that down a bit more, and then the green as well. I'm now going down to the calibration, and we're going to play with this. This is a trial and error, guys, and you need to be careful with this as well. I'm gonna go there, bring back that hue a bit, gonna bring up the greens quite a bit, saturation just down a bit, and the blues, check the saturation on that. I quite like the skin tones there. We can up the exposure a bit more, maybe bring a bit of contrast there, down there as well. And let's see what we can do with regards to color grading. The first thing I would suggest is that you work with the shadows of the color grading, oversaturate it quite a bit so that you can clearly see the color that you want to use. You might want to go for a blue or a warm color or even a green, depending on the look you want. I'm gonna go for an orange, and as soon as I got the color I like, I'm gonna hold shift. As soon as you click shift, you'll see a little line happen there. As soon as you click shift, you'll see a little line appear. That is locking in the slider on the side to change color, so you can't change the color now. And I'm just gonna drop the saturation on it. I'm gonna do the same with the shadows, gonna up the saturation, pick a color that I like. We might go blue, but I think for the shadows, I'm gonna go warm again. Hold shift, down the saturation quite a bit again. And now I'm going to play with the midtones. The midtones, same again, oversaturate, check where you want to go. I think I'm going to go blue with this one. Down the saturation again quite a bit. Now I'm going to up the exposure again. I very much like that. I like the overall look of the image. I'm going to go to saturation, play a bit with it. Just drop that. We can even go to luminance on the skin tones for the oranges. You can see the highlights on it is popping quite a bit, which I like. Let's see what happens with the blue. Maybe bring that pot at the back, maybe the greens a bit, and even the yellows on the shoes. I like that a lot. I'm now going to go down to the adaptive portrait presets that Lightroom recently introduced, and I'm going to click on the glamour portrait. That's going to do some skin softening, work on the eyes, etc. You can click on here and go to the lips because I can see it's slightly too pink for my liking, and I'm just going to undo a bit of what Lightroom did there to it. I'm now going to create a brush mask. I'm going to zoom in 300% to the eyes. And I'm going to brush the catch lights in our eyes like that, and I'm going to bring up the exposure quite a bit. Now I'm going to zoom out just to double check that it's not overly done. I quite like the way it looks. We're now going to do a bit of retouching and remove unwanted things, like for example this big sculpture, so stay tuned to see how I do that. But I'm going to start with the legs and just remove some strap lines by using the content aware and drag it. If it doesn't work, the content aware, then you can use different things like the cloning tool or whatever, but for this the content aware does work nicely. And there's some strap lines and other little lines that I want to just remove. If you want to move, just hold spacebar and you can move around on the image. We're going to move all the way around and look for little marks and stuff that we do want to remove. See there. I will also have to remove some, let's call it blemishes in there, just unwanted hair that's in spots that we might not want. Be careful with it. Hair is always a difficult thing to do. We're going to remove quite a bit here and clean it up. That little part, I'm not sure we will be able to do it on Lightroom. I'm going to go to 300% and see if we can actually remove it. If we can't, we'll try and do it in Photoshop. But it looks like Lightroom actually did a pretty good job. Once I zoom out, I'll have a clearer view of it. But that's a mistake, so I'm going to Control Z just to undo that. Let's see if we go to 100% if it's acceptable. Oh, that's quite acceptable. There's still another little hair there, and that one over there that I want to remove. That's quite good. There's another little hair there. Let's hope Lightroom does that well. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm going to go to 100% again. That's great. I'm going to go back to the masks that Lightroom created. I want to go to facial skin. I'm going to zoom in on the image, then click on subtract with a brush. I'm going to click O to activate the mask. And now all I want to do is to bring back the details on the eyes so that it doesn't get softened with the rest of her skin, as well as the eyebrows and the lips. So make sure that Lightroom does not select that. And I'm actually going to bring back this part on her ear. I quite like that. And I want to see if Lightroom selected the rest of her body, and it doesn't look like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another mask. This time we're going to go select people and see if Lightroom actually selects her, which I think he will. And what I'm going to select is body skin, and I'm going to say create mask, and from there I'm going to go down to clarity and pull down the clarity quite a bit, pull down texture. I'm going to go even more, and now our whole skin is nice and smooth. Obviously be careful to not overdo this. And I want to sharpen the image a bit, and we're going to go down to masking of the sharpening. Hold down Alt and then do the slider. As you do this, you'll see some white and black appearing. The white means that will be sharpened and the black will not be sharpened. So I'm going to go to about 80 because I can see all the lines being sharpened now. From there, I'm going to zoom into the image. I'm going to hold Alt again and check the amount to about 60. There I can see it's sharpening quite nicely. And we've got a nice and sharp image of her. I love how her eyes is popping. I do want to bring out a bit of color on her shoes and so on, but there's a lot of brightness in here. So I'm going to just add a linear gradient just to drop the exposure a bit. I'm going to drop the exposure, but I'm also going to warm it up a bit. And suddenly that shoe is popping a bit more. And I think what we can do is to create another mask with object and select the shoe there, and I'm just going to add another one and select shoe again, object, and all I'm going to do now is to saturate the shoes a bit. There we go. I like that a lot. Now for the big thing, we need to remove this big sculpture, and for that I'm going to press Control E on my keyboard. And that opens up Photoshop's new beta version, and I'm going to use the lasso tool, and we're going to go all around this sculpture quite closely and just drag the mouse around. I can even go over the dress a bit, doesn't really matter. Go around here. And the interesting thing is this was only recently introduced. When I did the shoot, I actually had to remove this sculpture because the client didn't want it in the photo. I had to remove the sculpture manually with cloning, and it took me like probably 2 hours or something like that. No, it was probably less. Any case, and now I'm going to just say remove sculpture and just say generate, and let's hope that Photoshop does a proper job. That's quite crazy, guys. Photoshop does give you 3 options, but I think option 1 was the best here, and I'm just going to flatten this image. One more thing I want to remove in this image is this fold in the dress, and I'm going to use the lasso tool again, but just circling around it, and I'm going to prompt the generator fill just to remove, and it's done a pretty decent job there. I like that. Let's see the last option. That's quite nice, but I think I'm going to go for the middle one. We're going to flatten, say Control S, and that will take it back to my Lightroom. Back in my Lightroom, and here's the before and after of the image. Click on this video to see why pros know how to shoot in bad locations. See you in the next one.